All right. Good evening. The time is now 5 o'clock on March 20th, and it's time to call the Public Safety Committee meeting to order. Ms. Patterson, will you please note attendance for the record? Thank you. At this time, we typically ask whether there are any members of the public who would like to speak to an item that is not on the agenda. At this time, there are no members of the public that are in City Hall, and I will check online to see if there's anyone online who would like to make public comment. It appears that there are no members from the public online either. So we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes dated March 6th, 2023. Council members, any questions, concerns on the minutes?
My only change would be we're actually council members, not commissioners. Small change. Thank you.
Yeah, I had the same concern.
All right. The one other comment that I had just on AB 23032 vehicle trespass ordinance, it states that I requested that Captain Lynch present it at the next city council meeting, but I think we should also indicate too that it was approved to go on the city council agenda, and then all of the typical verbiage is, but just so that that's clear. And with that, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Seconded.
All right. Thank you. I guess all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so moving on. The next item up is Agenda Bill. This is AB 23-045, the opioid settlement. City Attorney Sturbank.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a second go-round, essentially identical to the first set of settlements that the council approved the mayor to enter into back in the fall, and it would essentially double the amount available to the city. Same program as previously. This is with primarily distributors and there is a manufacturer, but primarily distributors or retailers of opioids. So there would be 5, it would authorize the mayor to sign 5 participation forms with individual agreements with the 5 defendants, and then the proceeds would be available to the city over a 15-year period. As before, the total amount available depends on the number of cities that sign on, and the amount drops off fairly precipitously if even 1 or 2 cities don't sign. But at least with one of the defendants, and I think it's Walmart, the payments would be front-loaded so that we would receive more sooner than the previous agreement or with the other defendants, where the amounts are expected to be prorated over a 15-year period.
City Attorney Sturbank, have we received any funds under the previous agreement at this time?
We have. Mayor, I don't know if you recall the amount. I want to say ballpark 10,000.
Okay.
With that, I'm not. Just since Chief may not know, I know it came into finance and that they were.
Right.
But yeah, the first distribution from the previous set of settlements has already arrived.
Okay. And did any of the cities refuse to sign on to last agreement? Do we know?
Not that I'm aware of. Chief, have any cities declined to sign the agreement? Yeah. I don't believe so.
Council members, do you have questions? Councilmember Watson.
So I guess the first question is, we're one of the smallest cities that happens to be receiving money, because you have to have a population of 10,000 or more, if that's correct.
I think that's the threshold. Correct.
So our settlement works out to be somewhere just north of 7,000 a year over the 17 years, 127,000. I guess 2 questions that, first of all, I see that they built in a 10% administrative cost to that. And I guess the other thing is, in order to receive the money, is it costing us staff time processing that, or is it just an extra check coming in the mail?
I'm not aware of any staff time
monitored
being incurred to receive it.
Okay.
You know, it's a fairly complicated web of documents, and the administration of the funds is supposed to be overseen at a county level, and the administrative fee is to be payable out of our shares to the counties. My understanding is that the King County agreement has not been finalized yet, so we don't know the exact terms or how that might
Okay.
come to play. It's contemplated that some cities will not keep their allocations, but will have them distributed countywide, or the services to be, provided by a county oriented service. I don't know that the administration has made any determination yet. There are services that we provide right now, including the behavioral health specialist, that would be eligible.
Okay. So 10,000 out of the first settlement roughly a year, and then 7,000 out of this settlement a year, some kind of,
Ballpark.
yeah.
Correct.
And then do we know how the money is going to be spent, or is it so insignificant that it just goes in the general fund and we know that it's 100% is spent for one of those uses, which are many?
Well, we need to document that it's spent on an eligible use. It can't just be put into the general fund and then spent. So finance has created a fund or a line item for that, and will be, I think, working internally to formalize the uses. And of course, we'll wait and see how the county MOU turns out, and work through whatever process might be associated with that.
I don't know. It seems like a lot of work for a little bit of money, but every bit helps.
We fought for that money.
I'm not going to question it.
Very important. So we're like, I don't
Okay.
care how much it is. It could be $5, but it's important that it gets paid out for
Okay.
because of the opioid issue. So
It's important to send,
Yeah,
send a message there and hold them to at least, I guess, some degree of responsibility for that. Any concerns, council members, or Councilmember Benson? Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, my only question was the last one that Councilman Watton asked was, just if the money was earmarked specifically for things like opioid concerns, or it seemed like our behavioral health specialist, those kinds of things. And I think if anything like this ever does come up, we should make a point of being certain to earmark it properly. We don't want to, add it to the chlorine fund at the pool. It needs to be, needs to pay for this is an insignificant amount of money for an epidemic of a problem. And I think it's important as a city that we're always sure that we use it properly.
I agree.
Yep. All right. Council members, any concerns about putting this on the consent agenda for next week? I would probably recommend putting it there, since we've previously agreed and approved together as council as a whole and as public safety. So that would be my preference.
I concur.
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and put it on the consent agenda for next week. And then moving on to Agenda Bill 23-044.
Thank you.
The Memorandum of Understanding with IAFF Local 2878 regarding promotions. Chief Carrera.
Thank you. This is I'm going to try and share my screen because I submitted this in a draft format because we were trying to finalize some language with the labor group. And my goal was should be up here in a second, was to meet with them on Thursday and Friday, but unfortunately they were running a bunch of calls. So this document is the same that's in the packet, except for one slight change that the union has requested, and that is to have this MOU expire on July 1st of this year. As you note in there, we have to extend our testing. We have a 6-month window that we have to provide a promotional exam. We were meeting that requirement. But after an unforeseen circumstance, the union and the city met to extend it by 90 days, and that put us over that 6-month period of time. We already have our consultant scheduled for early June to do this. We're not going to have any issues with meeting this deadline here. My conversation with the union was more, I think, my read on it is there may be members of the union that do not want to see this get extended again, obviously, or any other test extended again. Although they do have the ability to say that if either party doesn't agree to extend it, they just didn't want to have the union as a whole potentially change that date for a few members internally that are planning on that date. So this is not going to be a problem for us in the fire department or HR to handle. We already have the test date scheduled. We'll schedule a civil service meeting. But this was the only change that occurred from what was submitted in the packet.
Okay. Councilmember Benson.
Do you anticipate whatever the circumstance was in this case that caused the need for the extension to happen again in the future at any point, or was this?
No, so one of the candidates was unable to take the test on the date that was scheduled because of some personal reasons. So what we've decided to do is that person will be back for that next test date, and giving that person the opportunity to test was important. We have a promotional exam every 4 to 5 years, and this person is one of our star firefighters that we would love to see either promote or at least take the test and have that opportunity to do so. And this allowed them to do that. And the union agreed that we should give that person that opportunity as well.
To the extent that this ends up pushing back when the promotion would happen, would they be eligible for, I guess, the difference in compensation? Or are they just gonna, I assume they're still going to be in the normal position that they're in now, so the compensation will be the same?
Correct. So they're in an acting lieutenant position right now, and it's ironic that you asked that question because that was part of the conversation I had with the union on Saturday morning when I came up to the fire station when we were talking about this MOU. The two members that are currently what we call long-term acting officers. They're in that position. They're serving in that role. Those two members are most senior, and they are going to be testing. But there's also 2 other members that will be testing too. We have 2 vacancies for that. So the union we started having a dialogue about adding language in there about pay related to this, because if the way the contract is written, if those members are promoted into that position, then they stay at step A, which is where they are right now, for 6 months longer while they're in that role on probation. But we both decided to kick that can down the road because we don't know if those 2 members are going to actually get promoted. There may be the other 2 members that end up with the promotion. And if they do, we'll have that dialogue then whether or not it makes sense to move them to step B so that there's actually a pay increase, and then they would stay on probation for 6 months and then get off and permanently have that position. So that was a topic of discussion, but we figured we'd just kick that down the road.
Okay, makes sense. Any other questions or comments? Great. I would be inclined to put this on consent as well unless there's concerns. Everyone in agreement?
I agree.
All right.
Great, thank you.
In that case, the next item on the agenda is going to be the significant incident briefing, as well as some lithium-ion batteries presentations. And this one I'd asked the chief to discuss. There was a town hall that happened that addressed the fires that occurred on March 8th and the 10th. And the chief gave a really great presentation, I thought, on both the fires and on batteries. And I think a lot of the information was quite useful. I appreciate the mayor putting it on. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So this is the same presentation that I gave on last Wednesday night up at the community center for the community. In the end, we had probably there was a handful of people that were in the room with us, including Councilmember Christensen and the mayor and city administrator. And there was also we also Facebook live streamed it, and there was about 20 or 25 people at its high point on Facebook as well watching it. I haven't received any questions from the community, but we are going to be making this presentation. I've recorded it on Zoom, and we'll probably put it on later this week so that the rest of the community can go to it and see it if they need be. But anyway, this was just kind of an outline of the agenda. We were talking about the department and the response and how we're handling this, because this is somewhat disruptive technology for the fire department. And then I'll talk a little bit about lithium-ion batteries and lithium-ion safety. As you guys know, the Snoqualmie Fire Department was established in 1939 as an all-volunteer fire department. We have a minimum of 3 firefighters on duty at 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at a minimum. Sometimes we have 4. The nights of the 2 incidents that we had, or 2 of the incidents, we ended up having above 3 on duty. One we had 5, and another one we actually had 6 firefighters or EMS responders on duty as well. In addition to the 15 volunteer firefighters, there's 3.5 of us in the fire administrative offices, which includes myself, Mike, our admin support staff, and our training captain, which was recently added. In 2022, we responded to 1,600 incidents, the most We're busier than ever, and a lot of that is being driven by growth in the region. Any significant incident that occurs up in the upper Snoqualmie Valley or on Highway 18 or on I-90 between here and Preston, we are either first on the scene or responding along with Eastside Fire and Rescue. And as the growth continues to grow, as the community continues to grow, the more incidents we're going to continue to respond on. We're part of the King County Medic One system and part of a robust mutual aid system as well. I won't dive too deeply into that. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this chart before. I've used it before in different presentations. This is a time temperature curve. It's something we use in the fire department. Basically, the bottom axis shows minutes that go by. So a fire starts and then a minute goes by, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and the fire grows. A fire doubles in size every minute that goes by. And our goal is to try to get there before flashover, although this shows flashover between 8 and 14 minutes. What we're seeing now with modern, with all the polymers that are in all the furnitures and other things, we're actually seeing flashover as quick as 4 to 5 minutes. Jeez. So it's pretty remarkable. Building rooms will flash over, and what flashover means is that basically everything in the room ignites at the same time, and it's no longer sustainable with life. So our goal is to get there before flashover occurs, especially if there's anybody trapped in that building. Normally there would be a dotted line. You'll see a residential sprinkler activates. Normally that line would then continue straight across because the sprinkler is going to hold that fire in check until the fire department gets there. It doesn't necessarily extinguish it entirely, but it does hold it in check normally until we can get there. And that's why fire departments and fire chiefs especially advocate so vigilantly towards fire sprinklers, because it's like having a firefighter in your home to protect you from some sort of event that occurs that's unplanned. So on the evening, this is what we call our effective response force. It's between 15 and 17 firefighters. This is a list of the tasks that need to occur on the fire ground to actually basically extinguish it or to have a successful outcome without overworking the existing staff that's on that incident. 15 sounds like a lot, but it's really not even enough. That's every single one of those members would be tasked, if not more, in a major fire within the community. These 2 fires or 3 fires that occurred up on Nye Avenue were not that significant. They went out pretty quickly, and I'll talk about that. And for 2 of the 3 fires, we actually did assemble 17, and one I think we assembled 23 on the fire, because that's how many resources we'll send. So basically what we refer to here is this is the weight of the response. The more people, the heavier the response that we throw at it. And as that previous slide noted, the quicker that we get there, so time plus weight has better outcomes. We know if we get there quicker and we send the appropriate level of response, that we're going to have a better outcome. And that includes for cardiac arrests as well. If somebody stops breathing, every minute that goes by, they have a 10% less chance of surviving unless CPR is started or some other means. And even then, it's no guarantee that that person is going to survive. This is our normal response to a residential structure fire. We'll send 4 engines, 2 ladders, 2 battalion chiefs, an EMS supervisor known as the medical services officer, an aid unit and a medic unit, and those are there in case one of the firefighters get hurt or if somebody is found in the building or somebody else gets hurt. It's not uncommon for people to try to go back into the house to save their pets or try to put the fire out. It's not uncommon for our friends in blue, law enforcement, to actually try to be the heroes and run in those buildings to try to save lives. That's what they're trained to do. That's what they do. And then sometimes, fortunately not in this community, we have to go in and rescue them as well. We don't have a lot of fires. In fact, our fire damage last year in 2022 only made up 1.5% of the property that was endangered by fire. So that's a pretty remarkable number. So I think our property value loss was about $300,000, and it was 13 million or something like that that was threatened by fire. That's a standard that we measure with accreditation as well. So in addition to that block up top for the Nye Avenue fires, we had additional units respond. We had a chief officer, which Chief Bailey responded to all 3 of those incidents. We had a fire investigator from King County Sheriff's Office. They are our contracted fire investigators. They handle the unincorporated area, and they handle a handful of city contracts as well. They're well trained. That's why we rely on them. We don't have a lot of fires, and it's hard to keep people trained in fire investigation. So it's best just to have a group like the King County Sheriff's Office handle that for us, and we pay a really reasonable amount for it. And then we also had PSC for utilities. And then on the day after the 3rd fire, we called the hazmat team out just to have a conversation with them after a phone call. And they actually came out with some specialized, not even really fancy specialized equipment, but basically a metal pail and some silica, some basically sand or glass, broken up glass that was in there, called cell block. And they actually took the batteries away from the house. So we had 3 fires. One was on March 8th at 7 o'clock in the morning. Chief Bailey was in the fire station, so wasn't the crew when they responded. And then we had another one on March 10th at just after midnight. And then a third one occurred about 8 o'clock the same night as the March 10th fire. For those who may not know where Nye Avenue is, it's in the Eagle Point neighborhood up by Jeannie Hansen Park. The firefighters were in the fire station, as I mentioned, and they responded from there to that fire all 3 times. Sometimes we're out of quarters, sometimes we're out of position, sometimes we're transporting a patient to a hospital. That wasn't the case for all 3 of these fires. We were fortunate to be in quarters when those calls came in. And I can take any questions if you guys have them. Well, I know I'm moving pretty quickly here.
Were these were at different locations?
Same house.
Oh, okay, right.
Yep, same incident, same house, same cause and origin. So, and I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. I'm going to talk about the first 2 fires because they're nearly identical, and I think I can do that and get the point across. And I'll talk about that third fire, if you will. So, the first fire on March 8th at 7, and then the one just after midnight on March 10th. We got dispatched to, one was, I think, a smoke investigation. Mike, is that right? Smoke investigation. And then when they got en route, they said they think the garage is on fire, so they balanced it. And then when they got there, the amount of smoke they had coming out of the building, they balanced it even further to what we call a working fire. And that sends that entire package that I talked about a few minutes ago. When they arrived on scene, and the top picture up there was taken the morning of the first fire on March 8th. All occupants were out of the home. That's one of the first things that we do. We want to make sure that everybody's out of the house. We actually go in there and search it as well. They had smoke from the garage. They opened it, and they had some heat and smoke coming from the garage in the back right-hand corner. That's that bottom left-hand picture over there. There's you can see I don't think I have a pointer here. Oh, maybe I do. In the back right-hand corner of the house, turn that on. Let me try the other side. I'll have Vanna White go up there for us. How's that?
Bailey.
Vanna Bailey. Thanks, Mike. So that bottom picture on the right-hand side is a picture of the back right corner of the garage if you're facing it. There's a metal shelving unit, and on it are 2 fairly significant size sets of lithium-ion batteries. I believe they were 40-volt batteries used to run lawn equipment. And the individual, one set was in the charger and another set was next to it. The one set in the charger ignited, or what we call propagated with these types of events. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. We had 17 firefighters on the scene, and in the end, when KCSO, the King County Sheriff's Office, came out and investigated it, they determined the fire to be accidental. Lithium-ion batteries on a storage shelf was the cause. Immediately next to those, so just on that other picture, you can see the panel and a bicycle. I'm sharing that picture just to give you a sense of the level of damage that was in the garage. This is a 2-car garage. This was on the other wall, okay? Those plastic materials are still intact, even the ones that are close to the ceiling. Everything is still intact there. It was just a little bit of smoke and heat that started in that right-hand corner. What probably happened was the battery blew off, and then it caught some material around it and above it on fire, and then it self-extinguished, probably because it either ran out of oxygen or ran out of fuel, one of those 2. And that's about 10 feet away, and you can see there's very little damage there. They also had their door shut to their garage, which is extremely important, which kept the fire intact inside the garage. So the next night, this is March 10th, after the second fire we went to. This is about 8:30 p.m. The occupants were not home when this fire came in. As part of a discussion at the morning fire, that first fire that happened on March 10th, just after midnight, there was a conversation that occurred between the fire investigator, the homeowner, and the fire department, and we agreed to take the materials that had burned the second time, which was the battery materials, and move it outside into the driveway away from other combustible materials, as well as some of the other burned material. Basically, what happened here was there was a stack of equipment, there was a stack of items that were in the garage that got moved out, and then they shut the door, and then they got moved back in front after we had left the scene. And what ended up happening was it's highly probable, according to the King County Sheriff's Office, that another accidental cause fire by lithium-ion batteries, another set of batteries or a portion of those batteries that were still in that pack, lit off, caught the debris around it on fire, and then started burning up the front of the building. That's what this picture here is on the top. That was taken by one of the fire crews that were responding we had 6 people on duty, and it was an aid car that got there a few minutes and took that picture while the crew was there. This fire too was quickly extinguished with one hose line on the bottom picture. They got there, put water on it, and went right out. There was some damage on the front of the house as well. We called out the sheriff's office, and they determined the fire to be accidental as well, lithium-ion batteries. So anyway, we actually left crews on the scene all evening because the homeowner wasn't there and we couldn't get a board-up company to come and secure the building. That's a standard practice for us, that we won't leave a building unoccupied. We also, another standard practice for us is we don't take people's personal equipment, personal items with us back to the fire station. This was one exception to that, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So the next morning on the 11th, one of the crews went up later on that day to just check on the house, just to make sure everything was extinguished and to look at it. That's a standard practice that we have as well. And they were talking with some of the neighbors, and some of the neighbors were still quite nervous about, hey, 3 fires being caused by the lithium-ion batteries. So the company officer, who was a different company officer than had been at these fires, reached out to the battalion chief at Eastside and then also contacted the hazmat team. There's a fire station that has a hazmat team in Eastside's area that we are part of. We're contracted part of we pay amount into it annually, and we get access to that team. They had a dialogue with them on the phone, and they said, ironically, we have this new equipment that we haven't even put in service yet. We don't even have policies on it. We haven't even trained on it, but it's going to be perfect for this. So they actually brought it up, and on the bottom right corner there is those metal containers with what's called cell block material in there, and it's silica that they placed the batteries in. They put them in there. They taped over it to make sure that it was secure. And then we brought them back to the fire station after a conversation with the neighbors and the homeowners. They were still uncomfortable with that being there, and the only way that they were going to get comfortable with it is if we would bring it back with us to the fire station. So we chose to do that. Ironically, now we've got like 4 pails out there all of a sudden. I don't know why. They're reproducing. One of our lieutenants went through the fire station and found some batteries, I guess, and decided to put some more out there, and he found some in the recycling can. So needless to say, there's a heightened sense of attention on lithium-ion batteries right now in the fire station. And ironically, since this fire, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, there's been a lot of dialogue, not only amongst the neighboring agencies, but also in the county, because of this changing environment that we're dealing with. A lot of the focus has been on EV vehicles, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But really, we need to be self-aware of all of the batteries that we're dealing with, all of these lithium-ion batteries. This is a snapshot. I won't show you guys the video. There is a UL Laboratory video if you guys want to see it, but this is basically a lithium-ion cell. It's got positive charges on one side, negative charges on the other. When it's charging, it's actually filling up the anode crosses over into the cathode and it charges it, becomes a charged battery, and then it discharges when it's being used. There's a separator there in the middle, and some of those separators are made as something as small as simple foil, is all it is. And each one of these contains about 3.7 volts, and then they stack them up. So if you see a 40-volt battery, divide it by 3.7, and that will tell you how many of these small lithium-ion cell batteries are in there. Then a car, like a Tesla or other EV vehicle, will have a whole bunch of those in there. Lithium-ion batteries are becoming extremely popular, both in laptops, electric bikes, electric vehicles, etc. There's a list there. On the top right, this is a stored energy Connex box. These are becoming more popular in certain power grids, where you'll see them store energy there, whether it's through solar power or other means, and then it makes it available for the power grid later on. That's a Tesla Powerwall is what it's called. So basically what I'm saying is that these are becoming much more popular in nature. I did the math before that I did this presentation. I think I got up to between 15 and 20 lithium-ion batteries in my own home, just from laptops, earbuds. When you start thinking about it, they're quite popular, right? And a lot of us, including myself, have never really had an issue with these. It's just now because there's so many of them out there, and there's certain things that happen with these things that can cause them to become somewhat dangerous. So basically what happens when we start talking about cellular failure is you'll see one of those lithium-ion batteries, or 2 or 3 of those lithium-ion batteries may get damaged. They could get dented, they could get shorted out, they could be overcharged, they could be overdrained, people aren't using them the right way. They'll end up having one catch on fire, and then what ends up happening eventually is more of them will start catching on fire, and then it's this phenomenon called thermal runaway. Basically, it's this ongoing, cycle of events that occur where the temperature is going up, it's catching the next cell on fire, and these are extremely difficult to extinguish fires on a larger perspective. This is a couple of incidents that happened on March 8th on the right. This is a crash up in Bellevue. In fact, this was a topic of conversation at my chief's meeting on Monday about how we all need to be on the same page as we approach Tesla fires. They were on that scene for 2.5 hours. City of Seattle now at their station 5 or 15, I think, is it 15 up in Capitol Hill? They have an energized vehicle response unit that actually has specific equipment on there to go out and handle these types of calls. And a lot of the focus has been on vehicles for the fire department. The one on the left-hand side is a picture of Metropolitan Sacramento Fire Department recently in January had a fire. They had to jack it up. They tried to get underneath it to put water on it to extinguish it. So we're just seeing them far more. The picture in the upper left-hand corner is in LA. They had a Tesla catch on fire in a wrecking yard. It's not uncommon for a Tesla, sorry, for a Tesla to potentially get in a car wreck. It may not look like there's any damage to it. The police impound it. It goes to the impound yard. 2 or 3 days later, it catches on fire. So that's what some of the places are seeing. And generally, again, they're fairly safe if they're used appropriately or whatever, but there are situations that we're being faced with that we weren't dealing with before. This picture up here is LA City dug a hole in the ground, filled it with water, and put the Tesla in it to try to get it to extinguish as a way to get rid of thermal propagation or thermal runaway. There's new emerging technologies that are coming out. This is a fire blanket that you can place over a smaller type of fire. There's also, that's a device on the upper left-hand corner that produces high pressure water that can be pushed underneath the car and push water through a high pressure underneath there to try to cool off the propagation. And there's some other stuff. And they're also having dialogues about how we're handling this from a code enforcement perspective, because it's not only the response side of it. What happens if somebody comes to the city and say, I want to build a lithium ion battery building center up in the business park? How do we feel about that? How do we respond to that? What are the codes? What is required of them? So there's a lot of ongoing dialogue with this quote unquote, like I said, disruptive technology. Yeah.
These things are driving around everywhere. They're all over the place.
They are. Yep. And in fact, that if you go and watch that news story, there's a news story from, I believe it was actually a Today story, but there's a couple of news stories that are out there, and you've got people that are on extreme ends of this. Some people are saying, oh, I see a Tesla, I'm afraid it's going to catch on fire. Or they say, there's so many of them on the road, it happens so infrequently, it's not really a threat. So it's just kind of extremes on both ends. But the biggest thing is, and this here talks about some of those safety, the safety side of the house, especially with the smaller lithium ion batteries. Make sure you're buying reputable purchased ones or made ones that are UL tested or other types of testing that's available for these types of batteries. Follow the manufacturer's recommendation. Don't mess with the charging systems. Don't use them. Don't plug other batteries into a charging system that doesn't belong there. They're not interchangeable, even though they may fit. Inspect the batteries after charging. They're also recommending that you store batteries in different types of a fireproof container. I have an old toolbox now that I place mine in my shop, because ironically they were all sitting above all the gasoline and everything else I had in my garage. So up until this event this week. So
This is part of the reason I wanted to have the conversation.
exactly.
I feel like nobody knows really, and at least from my experience, nobody's taken those steps just to make sure that it's as safe as they can make it at their homes.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
charge it till you need it, and then you
Or you go
got
to
a
use
fully
it and
charged
it's
battery when you
dead. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And they're recommending now, not only just using the charger, but also don't leave them in the charger. Take them out of the charger, take them out of the device, and place them in a fire safe type of container if you're not using it, just in case something happens. There's a ton of videos online, if you want to go look at them on YouTube, that shows when they purposefully overcharge a bicycle battery, what happens, how it cracks and starts to smoke, and then there's a flame about this high off the ground of it, and it sits there and burns for 30 seconds and enough to catch other things on fire.
These are the bikes that the 12-year-olds are riding everywhere.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That I have at my house as well.
Yeah, well, and there's all kinds of emerging technology for these things, right? I mean, and now with the standard of only being able to sell non-fossil fuel vehicles by 2030, whatever the year is, we're just going to continue to see more and more and more of these. And in fact, that's the conversation in the fire service, working with the federal government as well as the state government from lobbying perspective to get money into the local areas to support equipment and training for the fire department and police departments as well.
Would it be more efficient at this point to just make fire retardant people?
Probably from a cost perspective, for sure. A couple other safety tips: don't charge your cell phone and things like that on flammable materials like a bed or a couch. Just put it on someplace that's non-flammable. Plug it directly into the wall socket. Store batteries away from combustible materials. Remove them from the charger when they're not in use. I already talked about that. These containers on the bottom, there's a ton of these online. We're not endorsing any specific one, but from a safety perspective, some of these are soft back, but they're flammable and explosion proof. You can charge your batteries in those cases, as well as the one on the far right is a metal box, but it can be anything. It can be a pail. It could be I have an old toolbox, like I said, that I just placed them in. And then if the battery is hot or you're concerned about them, you can remove them, take them out, put them someplace where they're away from other flammable material or in a flame-proof container. And then 21 days is the standard. That is the time until you determine that they're safe. We've got those items behind the fire station. They're there for another 2 weeks because we have to wait 21 days for them to be safe. And then you can bring them to a local recycling center. Home Depot, I actually contacted the Issaquah branch. They actually accept the batteries if they're rechargeable there. And you can bring them in and drop them off. And I'm just telling people, if they're not comfortable, or if they're concerned or they're worried, call 911. We'll go out and we'll check them out as best that we can. And we're going to obviously err on the side of caution. And if somebody has a set of batteries that we're worried about or they're worried about, we can always put them in the cell block or in a pail, call it or even call out the hazmat team until we get that equipment locally. We are changing a couple of, just really quickly, these are just some of the reasons why these batteries are so popular. That's another example of a smaller lithium ion battery cell. The bottom left-hand corner talks about how the lithium ion batteries are lighter and they provide more power. That's why they're more popular than nickel hydride or nickel cadmium batteries, or even lead acid batteries that are non-rechargeable. And we even carry them on a fire engine. That picture on the bottom right is a picture of the side of our fire pumper with a 24 volt or 28 volt DeWalt tool. And we use them in the fire department as well. And they're fairly safe as long as you're following the manufacturer's recommendation. OSHA describes it as generally safe and unlikely to fail. So a couple of things we're doing to get the word out. We talked about this. This is a newsletter. This is a lithium-ion battery safety sheet from the National Fire Protection Agency, NFPA. We rely on them heavily for fire service consensus standards and other safety type of information. There's some really great information there about safety tips. There was already in the past Friday's email blast and newsletter, there was information about lithium-ion battery safety. Dana McCall, the communications coordinator, has already placed we have a web page specifically with this on there. We're probably going to expand it over time. We have the running head or the bullet on the main page of the website that you can just click on it and it brings you to that page. And we're going to also place a set of these in the utility billing as an insert for the next time around. So we're doing our part to get the word out. In addition, Mike is he's the chair of the operations committee at the county level. And we're talking about it in the zone. So Mike's going to be part of the fire chiefs have already directed all of the staff to develop policies and procedures. So we're all singing by the same sheet of music when we respond to these types of incidents. And Mike's going to be part of the development of that policy. And just finally, these pictures here, there's a UW safety sheet that provides a lot of data. If you click on the QR code, it'll bring you to it. And then the NFPA sheet that I had just shown you a few minutes ago. And I can take some questions if you guys have any more.
Thank you. Council members? Councilmember Watton?
The only one is, thank you for sharing this, because I've been lecturing my family for years not to set their notebook computers on furniture and flammable materials. I had no proof.
There you
Now
go.
I do. But I think, from a community standpoint, you can't talk about this too much.
Oh, I agree.
Because people need to be reminded of the outcome of, my goodness.
I didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. And again,
Yeah.
like I said before, the buzz at the fire, we have a morning conference call with the fire stations around us. For the next 3 days after this incident, this was the conversation about what these look like and what to look for, because it just wasn't really, we were just going in there, we put the fire out and we go.
I think most of us think of it as wood and like petro fuel and matches.
As the big concerns or safety
Yeah,
issues?
as being flammable.
Mm-hmm, sure.
We don't think these things are flammable.
Yeah.
They are.
And if they do become dangerous, right, there's a recall on them. And then, there was a Samsung model a while back that was a problem. And there was some other laptops that were a problem a few years ago. I think 2016, 2012 was another time. Because they do go through testing, right? So a lot of these go through testing. But if they're exposed to extreme heat or extreme cold, then that potentially, or they're dropped or damaged, or they get broken or cracked, like you saw in that picture there of the propagation, just takes that and it can happen 2, 3, 4, 21 days later, 20 days later.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for we were going to bring a shortened version, but thanks for suggesting we bring the whole thing.
Yeah, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the fire pumper order update. And for this one, I'd asked Chief Carrera just for an update on the new fire apparatus, including when we could expect to get it? I know there's a horribly long lead time.
Yeah, there's still a long wait time for it. We do have all the agreements signed. The mayor executed that agreement. We have met with the builder. And just as early as last week, I was having a conversation with Matt West, the lieutenant that's leading this effort up. And they're still exchanging some emails about the start of that clock ticking. So I should have more information to share here in the next probably 2 or 3 weeks. But they are working on it. We're still aiming towards that date of, I think it was 300 days or 340 days or something like that. So hopefully sometime next year we'll take delivery of it.
Fantastic. Any questions? No. All right. Thank you for the update. The next item on the agenda is the legislative update with Chief Phipps.
Hello.
Hello.
My, seems like it's my bi-weekly or every 2 weeks, I should say, legislative update. But we're getting towards the end. We're getting close to the end. But Blake is, I'll just touch on a few of them. Blake and the pursuit ones are the two major ones that there's still a lot of debate on as we speak today. Even today, we had a hearing on the Blake. I'm not sure. I was checking to see what was discussed in that and what the outcome was, but I don't know at this point. But what's interesting in Blake is that they did pass one. And if you recall, there was several that were put forward as kind of a fix for Blake. And one of them is passed through, and it's Senate Bill 5536. It is supported at this point by law enforcement. It is way better than the current condition. But that, as we know, is going to be over if there's no legislation passed. It's going to be over July 1st. And at that point, everything would become legal. So what the current bill that was passed, 5536, states is that it's essentially what we'd liked and what law enforcement wanted, as well as many, many other people, including hundreds of council members and mayors, in the fact that it is going to repeal the two, if you will, warnings that we used to have to, when we made contact with somebody who had personal use amount of narcotics, we would have to basically give them a warning and some references to go to seek help if they wanted to. So it repeals that, and what it does is it is now going to make it a crime, not a felony as in the past, which I think everybody agrees it should not have rose to that level. It's going to be gross misdemeanor. And the big part of this is it's going to be an incentive for them to get the help that really we all hope that they get to resolve the issue and not incarceration. And so it is a bill that we support at this time. We are a little bit concerned that when it gets to the floor that there's going to be discussion to water that down. And so we're still going to watch it closely until it passes. And so that's on the Blake. The pursuit was actually an interesting thing to watch and how that all transpired. As we know, the Senate from the very start indicated that they were not going to be even having a vote on it. It was not even going to come to their floor. And so it was really on the House to come up with their version of a pursuit legislation to change the current condition, which, as you all know, there was a standard of probable cause for us and very limited crimes that we could even pursue on. So essentially, pursuit was stopped. And so in the current one that was passed, SB 5352, it does put the reasonable suspicion back in place. But going back to how this transpired, the House actually had a bill that they had approved initially in committee, and it went to a second committee. And in that, the day that they had to vote on it, 5 o'clock, they had voted earlier in the day, no, that it was not going to pass. And the Senate was watching that because they weren't going to have one go through. And so they realized that the House was not going to be able to have a vote by 5 o'clock. And so essentially the Senate picked up what their bill was and they put it through as is. And now the debate starts as we move forward. But at least we have one bill dealing with the pursuits that does take it from a probable cause to a reasonable suspicion. It does add assault, vehicle assault, and domestic violence assault to the violent crimes that were indicated in the last legislation. And so it does add that. It is better, as we know, than our current condition, but it's not sufficient for what we want. It's not sufficient. We're going to still work on that. And I am I'm chairing the legislative arm of the King County Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Committee. And it's going to be my focus to continue to work on this until the next legislative year. So we have something in place and we're not rushing to figure out what we would like. We all know we want to get somewhere, but we're not quite sure what the path is to get there. And so pursuit is a big one. It's not going to change any of our thefts that we're dealing with. It's not going to change any of that. For example, we had the gentleman, if you will, that was committing the thefts on our mails. They were our mailboxes. We actually had him stopped. He went into a cul-de-sac, made the U-turn when he realized it was a cul-de-sac, and drove by our officer and gave him a friendly gesture as on his way by, and we couldn't do anything about it. And so it won't stop those kind of things. So we still got some work to do on trying to find a safer way to pursue with those risk standards, those risk identifiers in place, so we can pursue some of these people that really need to be caught, or else it's just going to get worse. And so that's the pursuit. We did have some good news on some of the bills that did not pass committee or are considered dead, if you will, although there are some circumstances that they can bring them back. But one of them was HB 1025, which was qualified immunity, and its associated one, which was HB 1445, which is pattern and practice. And both of those are dealing with the accountability and the immunity of an officer while they're out doing their job. And in the pattern and practice, it gave the AG's office the authority to bring an investigation to an officer dealing with pattern and practice. And qualified immunity, that really exposed the city as well as the officer. If they, and it wouldn't have mattered too much whether there was within policy or out of policy, if they felt that there was a justification for bringing a case against an officer or a city for qualified immunity, they could do so. There are things in place now today that you can do that. If an officer commits something wrong, violates policy, commits a crime, obviously, they can be held accountable for that. So there are things in place to hold officers accountable to make sure that they're doing right. And this all, if you will, March 29th is our next deadline as far as bills. And so we've got 9 days, well, 8 days now to see what is in front of us and what legislation we'll probably have. So that's kind of the brief update I have.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Watson.
So another item on my radar, and probably for you as well, and that's the second time that the King County Executive has proposed closing the King County Jail. And have you gotten any updates as far as an alternative to the King County Jail, or the plan as to how we're going to deal with that?
That started to be a focus when I was the chair or the president of last year of the King County Chiefs. When they did close the jail, they closed the jail for about 8 hours one night. And in fact, there was a city in South County that had a subject that needed to be booked. It was either a homicide suspect or attempted homicide, and they had no place to book them. And in my discussion with the director, who is new, he's here from California, they would have booked them. So there are some things in place. You're getting at to the issue of its substandard housing, if you will, is what the old building and it's substandard. And so we don't know where that's going, but it's along the lines with the juvenile facility and closing the juvenile facilities as well. We have to have some place to house them, because you can do whatever you want as far as passing legislation to say this is a crime or this is not a crime. But if you've got no place to house them, We run into this all the time. We have 3 facilities that we book people in: Issaquah, SCORE, or King County. And there is many times that Issaquah will not take our arrestee because of a medical issue or their condition or whatever. And SCORE will not take them, or they end up in the hospital, and King County won't take them. There have been times that we have actually literally had to release them on a citation. I can't imagine what a larger city, what they're having to deal with on this. So this is one of the focuses of the current chair of the King County Chiefs is, what is the future of this? We all know you got to have some place to book these people. You can't just close a jail, but that is what's being talked about. And also the juvenile facilities as well. And we know we have to, there's juveniles out there, we know, that need to be housed because of their behavior and of their acts that they committed. There just are. So.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Watton.
And then also on the juvenile side too is Echo Glen. Have you been, I presume that they're keeping you abreast of to what they're doing to keep our community safe?
Yeah, luckily they never exited the building itself. They were contained inside a room. They did leave for a short time. They got, but it was within the facility. And they got like a computer and a couple other items, I think. But essentially they were secured in a room. And I'm having a debrief with, we're going to be at Echo Glen with the King County Undersheriff in the next week or 2. I haven't scheduled a meeting yet, but they contacted me today saying, and this is what we did last time as well. But this one, at least they did not exit the facility as before. But that's another example of why there has to be a secure facility. And they're working on a secure facility there, but there's problems with that, obviously. It's not fenced around. It's problematic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right. If there's nothing further, we don't have any other items for new business, future discussion. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All right, and we're adjourned.